Today we're looking at a 5-2 reflector on the cross of Incarnation. And so what we know of reflectors are that they're very rare. And we also know that 5-2s are very rare. In fact, it's probably only around 1 in 1,000 people that are both 5-2s and reflectors. And we're going to look at how these play out together. I think I'll start by talking a little bit about the 5-2 and the cross of Incarnation, and then we can talk about what it is to be a reflector, and close with looking at the not-self hierarchy, which is one of the most important things for reflectors. I mean, it's important for everyone, but kind of like how motivation is especially important for projectors, I would say the not-self hierarchy, and really understanding the actual individual gate activations in the undefined centers from a not-self perspective is very important for the reflector. So to begin with, being a 5-2, what is it to be a 5-2? It's a transitional profile. It's the transition from the 5-1 to the 6-2. And as a transitional profile, like all transitional profiles, it is here to be objective, to be aloof, to have no political leaning one side or another, no desire or agenda, no plan, no attempt to take sides in one way or the other. It's innocence. All transitional profiles have motivation innocence. So here we're looking at somebody who has an innocent motivation. The question I always ask people with innocence, and what have you observed? And what's the last thing you noticed? What do you observe about this? What have you been noticing about this? What's the most recent observation? What's the most... it's not even really asking for opinion, although it could be. It's really just asking for an objective report from the hill, so to speak, from the fool on the hill removed from the action. That's what I ask for. So anytime I see somebody that has motivation innocence, I never ask them, and what is your goal? That's a desire question. I never ask them, and what are you going to do about it? That's guilt. Or what do you think will happen? That's hope. I try to align that person to their innocence. And what you find is, because of transference, virtually everyone you meet with innocence motivation is going to be going around, actually in their transference, they're going to be going through life essentially haunted by regret. Because you see, the transference of innocence is to desire, ghosts. And as long as they have an agenda, and as long as they have an expectation, and as long as they're taking sides and they're getting involved, and they're an active sort of agent strategizing for certain outcomes and so on, they're going to be transferred, and it's going to be ghosts. Innocence is aliens. They're supposed to be an alien. But when they transfer, we symbolically get the ghosts of the past haunting them. So you see so many innocent people out there that are haunted by their past. But they're not here to be priests. An innocence person is not here. See, ghosts is the third color at the level of encounter. Priest is the third color at the level of a role, we could say, or one archetype of a role that they would play. They're not here to be priests, they're here to be Buddhas. So when you see this 5-2, heretical hermit, this heretic hermit reflector here, you know that they're really here to be a Buddha. And the Buddha doesn't have expectations, and the Buddha doesn't have goals, and the Buddha doesn't have a purpose, the Buddha doesn't have reasons for doing things, the Buddha doesn't ask why. I mean, innocence is so far out of motivation. Desire is the core of motivation, and the other motivations stem from desire. Hope is a form of desire. Fear is a form of desire. Need is a form of desire. Guilt is a form of desire. The desire to take responsibility. But innocence is the antithesis of desire. It is the opposite of desire. It is somebody who not only themselves has no desire, but isn't involved in trying to get others to be aligned. Desire is a motivational speaker. I'm third color desire. So when I talk to people, something in me takes over and I preach at them like a preacher. And I get on my pulpit and I preach to them to be aligned to their correct motivation. I give them a pep talk, right? But it's always funny when I do this for the innocence people, because my pep talk is basically like, pep isn't for you. Don't get pepped up about things. Stay objective, stay aloof, stay detached. Don't get involved. It doesn't involve you. It's a very weird kind of pep talk that I give to these innocence people. So what else do we know about the 5-2? Besides innocence, their body is designed to take in single ingredients, to take in one food at a time, either alternating or consecutive as the case may be, and essentially to remain a pure vessel. It's very important, the quality of the food that they take in. It's less important for the upper trigram types. If you're 4th, 5th, or 6th color digestion, Ra always joked with his 4th color digestion, he could eat roadkill. Well, the first lines are not here to eat roadkill, although I guess it is a single ingredient. Sorry, the first color, I should say. But the first color determination is, the cave person diet. And so we see that this heretic hermit reflector is also here to kind of be both a Buddha and a cave person. So we've started to see this other layer of it, how important it is for that person to remain distant, to remain observant. See, here's the other thing. One last point about desire versus innocence. Desire is about locking in. And when you're locked in, you're not observant. I'm a desire being. When I'm locked in, nothing can distract me from that. Ra Uru Hu was a desire being. He was 3rd color desire, and he would lock in, and nobody could convince him, strategy and authority is only sometimes relevant. No, it's like every single time, strategy and authority, with no exceptions. Very absolutist in this way. So you can see that a big part of it is that it's mutually exclusive to be locked into that agenda and to be observant. The more locked in you are, the less observant you are, and the more observant you are, the less locked in you are, and that's good. So for you, for this person we're looking at here, this person isn't supposed to be locked in. They're supposed to be observant. They're supposed to be distant. They're supposed to be detached. Now, what supports this is the proper brain health from eating single ingredients. As soon as this person eats a burrito, as soon as they eat a bowl of soup, as soon as they eat a sandwich, their cognition goes away. There's no way that they can hope to have the refined state of consciousness of being able to notice when they're truly living their fullness of their innocence, when their cognition itself is being damaged from not being given the right nutrients, the right nutrition. See, in human design, your food, what you eat for food, it does affect your health, but it primarily, most significantly, affects your cognition. It affects your brain. You're feeding your brain, and if you don't eat correctly, your brain doesn't function correctly. And there's more to it too, of course. The environment is so important, and what you notice in your environment, what you're here to see, is so important in human design. But none of that happens without this foundational cornerstone that is determination. The design internal, the food that you ingest, and the conditions or circumstances, as the case may be. This is a conditions digestive system. The condition is that it has to be one ingredient at a time. The condition, these are people who need salt licks, The condition is you eat the ingredient, and then if it's not salty enough, you eat a little salt, and if it's not spicy enough, you eat a little hot pepper. But you certainly don't mix it all together. So, looking at the 5-2 profile, the 5th line is here to universalize. It is here ultimately to take the torch of history that's passed to it. It's passed the torch, it's passed the baton, and it has its moment to, basically its moment in the sun, its moment to contribute. Now, most fifth lines never get to that point of contributing to the collective in this way, but this is the purpose of the fifth line. Look at Ra. His purpose was to contribute human design to the collective. And it's not easy getting things into the collective. Getting it into the collective means it's canonized. It's part of the canon. It has a Wikipedia page. That's what it means to get something into the collective. And it's hard to contribute something that gets its own Wikipedia page. But that's ultimately what the fifth line is here for. Now, there are many other versions of this. It can also just be offering practical help to strangers. It can be offering practical help, or just putting things out on the internet, for instance. This is great for fifth lines. It gives fifth lines a way to attempt their work of universalizing. Fifth lines are here to deal with crisis. They're here to, I'm talking about the fifth line personality primarily, as an outer authority, as the conscious mind. 3/5s, oh yeah, they have a lot of crises. They're just, they're here to break things, moreover. And the crisis gives them an opportunity to experiment with new things to break. Or a 2/5, a 2/5 is going to have their own relationship to crisis and so on, but it's different than when it's a fifth line personality. So the fifth line personality is really here to interact with strangers, to get out there in a public way and have a public face, and to really offer practical help in times of crisis, practical provisions in times of crisis. And the thing is, the 5/1 does this by learning and studying and getting their solid foundation, which can take them 20 years because the first line is inherently insecure and not solid, right? I mean, it's trying to be, but it takes it a long time to become solid. And the 5/1 ultimately gets to that point. And what I find with so many 5/1s, the vast majority of 5/1s, is that they're only doing the fifth line thing and they're reaping all of the benefits, all the rewards of the fifth line, which is that it's immediately trusted and it's a seducer that's able to kind of bat out of its league, so to speak, and able to get better jobs than most people think they should, or find more, elusive or harder to obtain, life situations. It goes all the way. You could even say that the fifth line sort of finds sexual partners that are so-called out of their league, although such a term, of course, is kind of ridiculous and childish. But, all down the line, you see that the fifth line has this tremendous advantage in life of being able to gain people's trust and convince them to trust it, and to break down their defenses and to get close to them and to get all these rewards from that trust. And again and again and again with the 5/1s, what I find is that first line, they haven't done their homework. They're not able to deliver. They don't have that solid foundation. They haven't put in their 10,000 hours, and they fail miserably and have to leave town. And then they complain about it. Oh, poor me, everyone's projecting on me. Well, the 5/2 is different. The 5/2 sees all the 5/1s doing this and says, leave me out of it. I'm not even going to bother with that. It's such a chore. You embrace somebody and they embrace you and they trust you, and then they suddenly have all these expectations of you. And then if you betray those expectations, even without meaning to betray them, doesn't matter. They crucify you, they burn you at the stake, they run you out of town with a pitchfork. Leave me out of it. The 5/2 sees how so few 5/1s can actually get out of this thing unscathed, right? So many 5/1s are out there trying to solve the problems and the solution doesn't work, and the 5/1s burned at the stake. They're fired from their job, they're ostracized, everyone gossips about them, their reputation is destroyed, they're ousted from the friend group. Again and again and again, this stuff happens to fifth lines. Join the 5/1 and 5/2 lounge on Facebook and you'll find so many fifth lines complain. Okay, so the 5/2 goes, leave me out of this. I don't have anything to do with it. Yeah, I have the solution. Yeah, I know what would fix it, but I'm not going to tell you, because if I tell you and you don't do it right, maybe even due to no fault of my own, I'm getting the brunt of it. So you see that the 5/2, people have this suspicion around the 5/2, and the 5/2 actually arouses a lot more negative projections, because the second line arouses negative projections in the sense of they could do so much more. They have the solution, but they're not giving it to us. They're hoarding. You see 5-2s get accused of being hoarders, of hoarding their solutions, right? Even if they don't have the solution, but they usually do. So the 5-2 is here with the solution in hand, but they don't want to externalize it, to universalize it, to give it to the other. They don't want to put it out there into the world. They just hold on to it because they don't want to be bothered. And this is the second line hermit. So what you find is the 5-2 has both projection lines. The fifth line projection, where fifth lines are always getting the positive projection. This person can help me. But then they also have the second line projection. What some people don't know in human design is that the second line is also a projection field line. And the projection field of the second line is always the negative projection. They see potential in them. They see potential in the second line. They tell them, you should do this. You should use this potential you have. And then are basically forget about it and are surprised if they actually do. If you tell a second line to do something and they actually do it, you're genuinely shocked. Whereas the fifth line, you don't tell them anything. You simply have all these expectations and you're surprised and disappointed when they don't deliver. So again, the fifth line starts with a positive projection. You look at this person, you go, wow, they could really help me. And then you're disappointed if they don't. The second line starts with a negative projection. Wow, they're so good at saxophone. Too bad they never record and too bad they never release a CD. Hey, you should make a band. You should release a CD. You're really good. And then you just forget about it. And that's a negative projection because it's basically, look at that untapped potential. There's that great saxophone player wasting their potential, never doing anything with it. They're so good, but they won't do anything with it. So you see, it's really a negative projection. Because the fact is, they generally are a good sax player. It's rare that you actually see something in a second line that, of course, people see all sorts of things in everybody. There's no guarantee just because somebody sees a potential in a second line that it's going to pan out. So anyway, when you're a 5-2, you're getting both. You're getting, wow, here's somebody who really has the answers. They really have the solutions. Too bad they're not sharing them. Too bad they're not giving to other people. The second line is seen as a taker, and in fact it is. It's a taker, it's a user, it lives off the fat of the land. It doesn't give back until it's called. And this is what you find with all these second lines. And I've noticed it again and again and again. Second lines won't bring booze to a party to share with people unless you tell them to. Then it's great. Then they'll get something fancy, But you can have a second line friend where they'll can keep, I knew this, second line, 2-4. I'm not saying they all do this. But this guy, kind of academic dude, I don't usually keep track of this stuff. It doesn't really matter. But it got to the point where it was hundreds and hundreds of dollars over a year, say. Every time we went to a bar, every time we went to a restaurant, anywhere, he would either have forgotten his wallet or he would need to borrow a little money, and then a couple weeks later he'd ask for it back. And the call wouldn't get through. The second line wouldn't let the call through. Now here's the thing. When the second line lets the call through, they're the most generous people in the world. When the second line lets the call through, you get like a Mother Teresa figure who's out there, giving. Especially the 2-4 because of the whole social aspect of it. Less so with the 5-2. But in any case, the second line has this binary where they are either going to deplete or they're going to nourish. And the default is depletion. The default is they are depleters. Now, there's nothing wrong with this. There's so much waste that goes on in the world. It's a good thing we have second lines because the second lines live off the fat of the land. They live off of the abundance. They live off the excess. A second line can get through this world only eating food paid for by other people. They can do it. I've seen them do it. They can get by only sleeping under roofs paid for by other people, maintained by other people. They can just couch surf around and eat other people's food, and that's fine. And the thing is, it's not, there's no moralistic judgment here because the other side of it is that when they are called, the second line can give so much more than anyone else. Someone else signs up to help, cure malaria or something, and they just do a normal amount of work. The second line devotes their entire life to it, especially the 2-4. Okay, so we're looking at the 5-2, so we have this interesting dynamic. We have the fifth line that's here to be public, that's here to help strangers, all this stuff. Although, of course, fifth lines are like the wizard behind the curtain. They need their privacy, they need their aloneness, and so on as well. but really here to have a public persona, to contribute to the collective, to get out there and affect strangers and help strangers that you have no personal connection with whatsoever, and to be part of this whole transpersonal karma thing where you interact with all of these transpersonal forces, to get out there and find your allies in this life, all this stuff. Then we have the second line that says, leave me alone, I'm a hermit, I just want to live my normal mundane life. That's such a drag, such a bother, having to deal with all these people, leave me alone. And so what you end up with is the 5-2 generally will not get involved, which, hey, being innocent could work out. That can work out really well. What the problem is when the 5-2 is transferred to their desire and they have an agenda, right? It all falls apart as soon as they have an agenda. But as this sort of aloof, distant, uninvolved person, this is great. Now, the thing is, though, you can be aloof and distant and uninvolved, and you can still be part of this whole transpersonal fifth line process of affecting people and of meeting those allies and having that transpersonal karma and so on. And in order to do that, it requires getting out of the shell. It requires overcoming that second line defense mechanism. Now, interestingly, the way that I've heard from 5-2s that they do this is by calling to themselves. Because you see, it's the second line body, it's the fifth line mind, and the fifth line is the one that calls. So it's almost like, come on, we're going to go on a date. You know you want to go on a date. Come on, body. It's almost like badgering the body into shape. Body, you should really do this. And the body's like, I don't want to do it, or it doesn't want to. But the fifth line has to psych themselves up. It's giving themselves little pep talks and so on. Now again, because it's innocent, it's not really a pep talk for any agenda. It's not really even a pep talk to get involved. It's okay for the 5-2 to be uninvolved in some ways. It's more, even as the most uninvolved fool on the hill, making objective interpretations or observations, you can still affect people's lives. You can still connect with these strangers by being a resource to them and having them come to you and ask you what you've observed. And maybe you can tell them something practical in all that comes from a place of innocence and neutrality and objectivity. Okay, so now we're going to look at the not self, or I guess we can talk briefly about what it means to be cross of incarnation. Cross of incarnation is very hard to generalize because you're really going to, it's not like you're a heretic about incarnation. It's not like certain crosses you can kind of figure out what the heresy is going to be. You can synthesize together, they're a fifth line on this cross. They're going to have a certain heretical opinion about it or a certain heretical view about it. But with the cross of incarnation, it's kind of like cross of the four ways. And I'm actually drawing from Ra's lectures on the incarnation crosses here, where he basically says cross of incarnation, the cross of the four ways. These crosses are really hard to generalize about because all it's really telling you is that a big part of your life is going to have to do with connecting to these transpersonal karmic forces and basically some sort of theme of reincarnation or incarnative, deja vu of feeling that you've known someone in past lives or things like that. And there's not really too much practical to offer here besides what Ra points out, which is true for all fifth and sixth line personality people, the 5-1s, 5-2s, 6-2s, and 6-3s, is that just because you have this transpersonal connection, just because you feel like you've known that person in past lives or known them all your life or whatever, that's not love. Doesn't mean it's love. And in fact, doesn't even mean they're an ally. You're going to have transpersonal allies and transpersonal enemies as well. And which one they are remains to be seen. So it's something to realize that you can have these feelings of deja vu and this transpersonal connection to people. Doesn't necessarily mean what we take it to mean in a personal way. It's impersonal. Remember that it's impersonal. Okay, so let's talk about the not self. So the not self is really going to be very important. So as a reflector, it's so important. I basically say for the reflector, when I take a reflector who's new into human design, and I realize this is a reading for someone who's not new to human design. This is a reading for someone who has some experience in the experiment. But regardless, when I first take a reflector, I really, really, really get them completely focused on the not self. And this is something that a lot of people in Gene Keys and some of the other offshoots of human design have talked down about human design because, it focuses so much on the negative, focuses so much on the not self. Well, this is really important for everyone, but for the reflector, I feel like it's so important because for the reflector, it's so necessary to learn to build a relationship with the cosmos. In fact, Ra said that the disappointment for the reflector happens when they value their human relationships and human interactions higher. I'm kind of paraphrasing, but essentially valuing their human relationships higher than that of the cosmos, or that they get disappointed basically in their interactions with people, and that the sort of way that they can genuinely be surprised and live out the reflector's signature, basically what they deserve to get that surprise that they're yearning for and craving, is through building that relationship with the program. And the relationship with the program means the relationship with the neutrino weather, the relationship with the transits. It means learning the 64 gates. It means knowing which centers the gates are in. It's a momentous task. When I have a new generator, new to human design, I get them to get a new notebook and to write down all the gates in their chart, one on each page, and then make a page for each center, and then make a page for each other, to basically fill up a notebook which is them. And every time they learn something about a gate, write it on that page. Every time they learn something about a channel, put it on that page. Have a page for each channel too. How they organize it is up to them, but have a place to store information about each gate that they have in their chart, and each channel that they have in their chart, and the defined versus undefined centers, and all the other aspects, as they go in their journey, profile, and so on. But I really have them focus on themselves. As a generator, the most important thing is that they learn about themselves. And this is also true for manifesting generators. I basically give them this homework of then learning about themselves and learning who they really are, and doing all these sacral session testing to find out what they'd like and dislike, and basically focusing on themselves. When I get a projector, I have them run charts of everybody in their life. I have them make lists of everybody in their life and have Rolodexes, or have a Google Drive spreadsheet of all the people they know. I have the projector look at how they interact with each one of those people and learn deeply, deeply, deeply how that person impacts them. Because for the projector, that's so important. For the manifestors, I kind of just let them do their own thing. For the reflectors, it's similar to the generator. It's similar to the generator in that what I have them focus on is themselves, but instead of just looking at their gates, sure, I have them do that. What I have them do is start keeping their moon journal, or really just their daily transit journal, and look at an ephemeris, or a companion book. There are some really good ones out there you can get, or even just checking the Jovian archive just now, and basically watching the click, click, click of the moon through each line, and watching the sun, watching the 5.7 days of the cycle of the sun go through each gate, and watching the nodes in their approximately 3-month, although sometimes as little as 2 or as high as 4-month movement through the gates. And really, for the reflector, the challenge is to basically notice this stuff, and then to really, really, really focus on the not self aspect. I mean, everyone I tell about the not self, everyone I get thinking about the not self and following strategy and authority and noticing when the not self flares up. But for the reflector, it's like, this is really it. For the projector, sure, I tell them about their invitation and about recognition, and if they're splenic, I tell them about the spleen, and if they're solar plexus, about their authority, and I tell them about the not self. If they're split definition, I go into the not self with the bridging gates, and if they're not, I go into the centers, and so on. But I really, for the focus for the projector, I have them focus on other people. And the focus on the generator, I have them focus on themselves and on what their energy is being used for and who they really are and what really makes their sacral go or or if they're a solar plexus defined generator, to be tracking that over time and to see how it changes and so on, and to see when they have the emotional clarity about what truly gives them satisfaction and peace if they're manifesting generators. And that's the difference, is that for the reflector, it's like there isn't all this other stuff to look at. there isn't all this. I mean, sure, okay, a reflector can use motivation. Great. A reflector can notice when they're in their transferred motivation. You can notice when you're in innocence, and you can notice when you're being pulled into desire, and that's good, sure. But at the same time, you're not really primarily impacted by the other people in your life anyway, so it's not really as good of a tool as it is for a projector, where they're trying to find the right forces, trying to find the right people. Sure, it's important for reflectors to have their allies too, it's important for them to have their community and all this, but it's also fluid. A reflector doesn't have a defined G center. They're not here to have one community. They're here to be able to move freely through the world. And they're here to have all sorts of different qualities flow through them, and different qualities over the course of their lives. So it really is a different game. And so that's why the not self is important for everyone, but for the reflector, the not self analysis is incredibly important, because it also plays in to noticing that the weather changes, basically, and how the program clicks through, and basically how the 9 undefined centers will crop up at different times, and how that reflector will essentially be able to recognize 9 different ways that their mind pulls them away from living their design. Because the reflector living their design is living a design of being at one with the cosmos, at one with the program, and especially an innocent reflector, basically just observing all of these changes. And it's not to say that those observations won't be useful to others. They absolutely will. When the right person comes to you, and your right ally that you can connect with, you can give those observations and be a real clean conduit for observing what's going on in the cosmos. But that's, it's so important to become familiar with the not self and to really track that. So to begin with, I'm going to assume there's already a familiarity of the 9 not self themes. So that's like step 1 for the reflector, is to notice in themselves which one of those not self themes is flaring up. For instance, when I was going through my deconditioning process, I have undefined ego. And so undefined ego was one that I noticed anytime I had my feelings hurt, anytime I felt threatened, anytime I felt touchy, anytime I felt emotional, anytime I felt choked up, anything like that. And anytime I felt mad that I had to prove something to someone else. And so I remember once I had posted a Carl Jung quote on my Facebook page. I love Carl Jung. Huge fan of Jung. Jung's Red Book is just incredible. I mean, so much of his writings. I'm a big Jung fan. Well, I posted it, and someone commented, Jung was a Nazi. Jung was a fascist. And I said, no, he's not. That's a misunderstanding. And they said, well, Jung was the editor of this Swiss magazine that published pro-Nazi propaganda during World War II. And I said, actually, he quit that magazine because he didn't support them. And if you read what he wrote, and then they go, well, actually, he wrote that this and this and this happened. Pretty soon, half an hour had passed. We're 40 comments into the thread, and I'm arguing with a random stranger. I mean, someone I know through academic circles, but basically a stranger. I have no connection to, I have no reason to argue with this person. There's nothing, it's all undefined ego. It's my undefined ego feeling threatened, wanting to prove them wrong, wanting to dominate them, wanting to tell them, no, see, you have to submit. You have to admit that you're wrong and that I'm right. And it's all bullshit. It's all undefined ego bullshit. So, there's a start for the reflector. Notice when the undefined ego flares up. Notice the negative self-talk, the undervaluing oneself, or notice the feeling of being affronted or offended. I deserve better than this. All that stuff is undefined ego. Undefined spleen, holding on to people, not being willing to let go, holding on to past relationships, being really clingy and smothering, being afraid that person won't talk to you or will leave you or will have their own life separate from you and not wanting them to be apart from you. All that undefined spleen stuff, notice that pop up. Undefined G center, feeling that the grass is always greener, something's better out there, notice when that flares up. Undefined solar plexus can be so nervous and so afraid of disappointing someone, of letting them down, and not wanting to show them how you really feel because, if they saw that, they would be so disappointed and have their feelings hurt, and I'd better not let them know. And presenting this hidden false self. I mean, I'm not going to spend too much time on the centers because I want to get to the actual specifics of the gate activations, because that's what's really going to be important here. But just at a basic level, think of these 9 centers as a 9-headed hydra. It's a 9-headed hydra, or 9 holes of whack-a-mole, where as soon as you whack one mole, the other jumps up, and as soon as you whack that one, another jumps up, and so on. And it's like 9 different traps or pitfalls or ways of getting stuck in this mental thing. And really what the mental thing is going to be about having expectations. It's going to be about having expectations about having agendas, because again, we're talking innocence here. It'll be different for other, reflectors. If you were a desire reflector, this would play out in a different way. If you were a fear-based, reflector, where fear was good for you, then I would say, great, you're here to be driven by the feeling that you might not really know about something, and you better learn about it, and so on. And that's fear. But you're not. You're not fear, you're not desire, you're not any of those, you're innocence. And being innocence, it's really just about not having an agenda and not having expectations. And that is what is so, so important here. So I'm going to assume that you know the kind of themes of the 9 undefined centers. Definitely one of the main things for the mind to do through all of this is to notice when they flare up and to identify which one is flaring up and to feel it as a physical sensation. Feel the butterflies in your stomach that is the undefined solar plexus. It's not always there. Sometimes it's worse, sometimes it isn't, right? Sometimes you're so nervous, it's clammy hands, it's sweating. Other times it's not there at all, right? So noticing when that nervousness is there, undefined solar plexus. Noticing when you're hurt, when your feelings are hurt. Noticing when you feel wounded. That's the undefined ego, right? Notice when you just feel really crappy in general. That's undefined spleen. Like undefined spleen can just feel run down. It can feel just blah, Or notice when you're super hyped up and almost amped up and hypomanic and so on. Undefined sacral. That undefined sacral, reflectors can get just as hyped up as manifestors and as projectors when they're around a group, and so on. And you kind of just learn to track these. So now what we're going to do, we're going to go through the not self hierarchy, and we're actually going to look at the individual centers and the gate activations in the not self. And so the goal of this is to really paint a picture of the mind and of the mental decision-making process and how the mind works. So by the end of this, you'll hopefully have a clear picture of what you're up against, because each and every one of us, regardless of type or profile or any of that, is up against the not self. We're all here to basically learn how to, here being studying human design in the human design experiment, to learn how to give up control, to give up mental control over the decision-making power, and essentially to give over control to the form, to where eventually the incarnation cross just takes over the life. And you find yourself doing things that your mind never thought you wanted or never thought you liked. I've been quoting this Yogi Berra quote lately that kind of gets right at it. Yogi Berra, the famous American baseball player, most famous for making malapropisms and for making kind of wrong statements and wrong sayings and just saying really silly things. And one of the things he said was, "I'm sure glad I don't like broccoli, because then I'd have to eat it." And his rationale is he doesn't like broccoli, so he doesn't eat it. But he sure is lucky that he doesn't like it, because if he did like it, he'd have to eat it. And it's gross. But of course, the funny thing is, if he did actually like it, he wouldn't be mad about having to eat it. So it's the same with human design. It's like our incarnation cross has the potential for a lot of broccoli, and we might not like the broccoli. But the fact is, as we give over power from the mind to the body for its mechanical decision-making process, we end up, the body likes the broccoli, so to speak, and we learn that we actually liked broccoli all along and just didn't realize it. So there's a whole lot of learning that happens. Now, that whole narrative does seem to fit for generators a little bit more than manifestors, reflectors, and projectors, particularly because generators are the ones that are explicitly here to learn about themselves, to really learn what their sacral does and doesn't like. And for the other types that aren't sacrally defined, they don't have that same life path. So I realize that, it might be a little bit off for the reflector, but regardless of type, we all have incarnation crosses. We all have purposes in life. Our purpose is in our DNA. We all have the potential for differentiated outer authority, which means the ability to communicate with each other and to not just give each other all the same homogenized crap that we get from everybody else, but to actually differentiate. So we all have this potential for individuation, for differentiation, to really become more fully ourselves. And that's what it's all about. And so what I'm going to do next, I'm going to look at the particular undefined centers. We're going to look at the gates in those centers, and I'm really just going to really paint as vivid of a picture as I can of the not self. And it's going to get pretty scary. I mean, this is really, when I do these not self readings, this is like the scariest thing. So, of course, to realize that this is not you. What I'm talking about here is how your mind works. It is the mind's hierarchy of criteria of what's important and what isn't. It's the mind's promises that if you do this, you'll get that pleasant surprise, and if you don't, you'll get disappointment. The mind using the carrot and the stick to try to get you to let it keep making decisions. And we know from this great knowledge we've all been graced with that that's not really how the form works. The form is now, due to recent evolutionary changes, able to make decisions on its own and survive. It used to be that if human design came around in prehistoric times, or even in the Middle Ages, everyone would get killed. They would get killed because they would say, well, I'm not going to use my mind to strategize and to try to think up schemes for how to survive. I'm just going to trust my body. And then they would get killed, right? Because at that point, we were not evolutionarily yet at the time. We were still developing the mind as the mechanism of survival. And that's why, for those 90,000 years, as we evolved out of Neanderthals and ultimately killed off all the Neanderthals and so on, that's why our minds became so powerful. And that's why, going back 2,600 years and so on, you can see in early Taoist writings already this realization that the increased power of the mind is going to have all sorts of problems. And it is. And the problems are that the mind is now at an evolutionary crossroads, or a time where it needs to take its correct place as arbiter of outer authority, meaning communicator, and to relinquish its control as decision maker. And that's where we're all at right here. And so I'm going to do this not self reading with the idea that, it's pretty scary. We're going into really how deep the mind goes in controlling the organism. And it's again, your innocence. It's not to fix it. It's not to try to outthink it. It's not to try to outsmart it. It's to observe it. It's just to observe it. It's just to notice when the mind starts to do this. And that increased awareness and noticing of that is enough that the mind is then able to say, okay, I'm helpless here. This is what no choice really means. It's ultimately the mind coming around to, wow, I'm helpless. I can't change how my mind works. I can't change my DNA, my design. I can't change any of this. All I can really do is watch and surrender and give up, control in this way. And so that's ultimately what passenger consciousness is. Passenger consciousness is the idea, that you're basically relinquishing control and you're watching. Now, that means different things for different people. I'm a desire being. So for me, giving up control and watching is not an excuse to go be innocent. I'm a desire being. So what I'm doing is I'm watching myself get involved. And I'm actually surprised at myself and going, wow, I'm surprised I cared so much about this. I didn't even know that. Wow, I'm surprised that I'm getting so involved in this. Wow, I'm surprised I'm watching myself, be a leader in a situation that normally I would have thought with my mind, I don't want to have anything to do with this. And, Ra himself was just as surprised to watch himself become this public figure, to watch himself as basically an egotistic, competition, self-centered freak suddenly take all this interest in connecting to all these other people and to basically devote his life to being a, collective being when all he wanted to do was get high and play guitar, So that's what human design is about. And that's what surprise ultimately promises for the reflector, is the surprise of finding yourself doing all these things you never even imagined yourself doing, because the mind at that point has given up control and is letting the form, the body, take over. And really not even just the body, but the hybrid of the body and the mind, the larger synthesis, the life force of the form in its unique differentiation. It's really allowing that differentiation to occur. And then there actually is a change at the cellular level. Then there are epigenetic changes. Your body does change, your breathing changes, your skin complexion changes, your voice changes, your eye contact changes. Everything, it's profound how physical the changes of human design actually are. But the no choice thing is that you don't just choose to have the genetics you do, or you don't get to choose how you're going to differentiate. Basically, you don't get to choose if you like broccoli or not. You can think you don't like broccoli, but if the form likes broccoli, and if you give up control to the form, you're going to be eating a lot of broccoli. And with that, let's begin our not self reading. And here begins the reading of the not self. So there's a not self hierarchy here, and we don't need to follow it perfectly. I'm just going to kind of talk about, let's say, the big three, or even I guess we could say big four. So, but we are going to go through all of them. So the foundation of the not self is the ego. This is the absolute strongest not self conditioning center. Partly because 70% of humanity has an undefined ego, and partly just because of its centrality in... It has a unique character in the body graph, and there's a lot of interesting mystical points about the ego. For instance, Ra said that if there were a direct channel between the sacral to the ego, there would be no such thing as death. So there can't be that, direct channel. And that's a little mystical aside. I'm not really going to go into that. You can follow up in Ra's Rave Cosmology series if you're curious about that, where he shows, for instance, the design of the Aeron, which is a hypothesized future entity that will evolve in hundreds of thousands of years, which will be immortal and will actually have a direct connection between the sacral and the ego. But in any case, the ego is the foundation of the not-self. It's the single strongest not self conditioning we have. It is the biggest carrot and the biggest stick, so to speak, to hit us over the head and keep us making mental decisions, and also the promises of so much satisfaction for the generators and success for the projectors and peace for the manifestors and surprise for the reflectors. Next, there is the solar plexus. And the solar plexus is second only to the ego in how strong it is as a not-self conditioning force. I mean, we have war on this planet because of the solar plexus. There would be no war if the solar plexus wasn't a motor. Ra said that when the wave stops, when the emotional wave stops with the coming of the rave, and only when the last of those of us who are emotionally defined finally die off, or even who aren't emotionally defined but who have solar plexus that hasn't undergone the mutation to stop the wave, essentially, well, I imagine that the undefined solar plexus folks would be fine. That's like their dream world, But basically, until that happens, there's no chance of world peace, because the defined solar plexus and the wave that it puts out there, which triggers the not-self of the undefined solar plexus in reaction to that wave, is why we have war. It's why we have so much suffering on this planet. The undefined G center is third in the not-self hierarchy. And the undefined G center is also, this is the trifecta: undefined ego, undefined solar plexus, undefined G center. It's nicknamed the Heartbreak Hotel, perhaps unfortunately. There have been some threads online about how we shouldn't use these negative terms, but hey, it's in the Maya. I'm just reporting. That's what it's called. And the undefined G center, it has such a huge impact on people. People who spend their entire lives searching, always feeling maybe a different partner is better for me. Maybe another job was better for me. What about the life unlived? Haunted by that unlived life of who else they could have been. That's the undefined ego. And then the fourth strongest is the undefined spleen. The undefined spleen will cling so tightly and hold on so tightly to anything that gives them a good feeling, a feeling of safety and security, and that nice dopamine hit. And then we go on. It goes to the ajna and the head, and then we have the root, and then the sacral, and then the throat, in that order. And so, I'll kind of start loosely going back. I won't go in exact order, but I think I'll end on the ego, because this will really show us ever-increasing severity of the not-self. And then we can kind of end with the punchline of this undefined ego, and really just, hopefully, if I do my job in my outer authority, I'll be able to paint a really vivid picture here of how this all works, and just what a torment the not-self mind is. And throughout all of this, I want you to realize that this is literally just the mind's way of making decisions, the mind's criteria of making decisions. And all of this goes away when you're living your design. When someone asks you, do you want this job? Or, you're offered a job, you have the ability to wait and to notice and to observe as the moon clicks through the different gates, as the sun clicks through, as all of the astro weather clicks through, and to observe for yourself how different aspects of your life force light up. Each channel that lights up for you is a temporary access to a dormant life force energy that you have in potentia, that you have virtually speaking. A reflector has virtual life force energy, and they actually have more than everyone else. It's just that they can't access it all at the same time. So you have the least channels of any type, but if you look at the totality of a monthly cycle, as the moon goes through 27.3 days, or however it is in the sidereal calendar, the sidereal synodic cycle of the moon, which is I think 27 and a half or 27.3 days, what happens is every single possible dormant channel that you have lights up. Every hanging gate that you have is going to light up. And that's not even counting the sun and the nodes and the planets, which also are going to light up and activate particular gates, right? And so that's what I'm trying to say, is that, as I'm doing this not-self reading, you can kind of realize that as long as you're waiting for you're waiting enough time. It doesn't have to be one lunar cycle, but whether it's enough time to get that clarity, or to come to that mechanical decision-making process where the outcome is all of the various dormant life force energies within your being have had a chance to light up and have had a chance to contribute their piece of the puzzle, and then the picture emerges. Okay, so let's just start with the throat. That's kind of starting on the outside and working our way inward of the not-self. So we see a completely undefined throat. And anytime you see a completely undefined center, as the ego is also undefined, completely open center, that really means it's beyond the binary in some point, in some sense of the term. It's beyond the not-self binary of getting attention or not. It doesn't even really know what it is. The undefined throat here, completely open, doesn't even really know what it means to get attention. It's not like even that it's always trying to get attention. Sometimes it's not trying to get attention. It's too dumb to know whether it's trying to get attention or not. Just like that undefined ego, Ra would joke, completely open ego would be too dumb to even know if it's trying to prove or not. But there's more to it than that, and we're going to keep going with it. So the other thing you're going to notice is that it has no fixed theme. There's no fixed way of trying to get attention. If you're around defined 35, or someone who has the 35-36, you'll be amplifying the attempt to get attention through emotions and through emotionality and through feelings. And you'll suddenly find yourself going, well, I feel this way, and trying to get people's attention through your feelings. If they're the 45-21, it'll be getting attention through money or through possessions or through complaining about haves and have-nots. Well, you have more of this than I have, and these people need more of this than that. It'll be talking about haves and needs. And so there's no fixed theme. It's really variable, the different ways it's going to try to get attention. We also have a lot of gates pointing at it, and gates pointing at an undefined center are felt as deficiencies in oneself. Gate 48 pointing at it feels insufficient, feels like lacking. I'm lacking the skills. If only I had more skills, but there's something wrong with me. I'm not skilled. I'm lacking gate 16. So the deconditioning here is to realize there's nothing wrong with you. You don't need to be a gate 16. You don't need to have the skills. See, the not-self is trying to be all 64 gates. The not-self is trying to be all 9 centers, all 36 channels. The not-self wants to be everything. It's trying to be every profile. It's trying to be everyone. The 3635 is the channel of sexual proficiency. It's literally, among other things, it's a channel of somebody who is really good in bed. Everyone wants to be that, everyone wants to be 35-36, or the 1648 on the other side is this channel of skills, right? Everybody wants to be really skilled and wants to be able to sit down and play Mozart perfectly the first time on the piano or whatever, It's not going to happen. It's just, that's the not self, is trying to be everything. What's so funny is that when I do readings for people, I really don't like doing them in person or on the phone or on video chat. I will, but what I much prefer when I do a reading, I do the reading first, just like I'm doing now. I record it. And then if they want to talk after, we talk. And we schedule a time and I answer all their questions. But what I have a hard time with is a lot of people, particularly if they're new to human design or not really in it, they're looking at it like a cold reading and they're wanting it to be a predictor of them. And they're basically identifying with everything. It's like, because all 64 gates are potentials for humans to experience at some point or other in their life. All 9 centers are potentials for humans to experience. All the 36 channels, we're all experiencing all of it. It's the not self that wants to consistently be all of it. So you describe what it's like to have defined ego, and you say, well, defined ego people, they have consistent access to their willpower. And the undefined ego says, well, I have consistent access to my willpower, and I'll prove it to you, So, yes, we look at this throat here and we see gate 16 is going to be felt as an inadequacy, felt as something lacking, as something missing. Oh, if only I had gate 16, if only I had the skills, if only I could express my skills. Gate 20 is also being so-called persecuted by gate 10, right? The feeling that gate 20 is missing. What's wrong with me? I'm lacking gate 20. Why can't I be present in the now? Why can't I get things done in the now? Why am I always procrastinating? Why am I spaced out and not fully present and not fully here? And why am I thinking about the past and the future and doing all this stuff? If only I were able, to have that presence in the now, and to really know myself in the now. If I really knew who I was in the now, then everything would be different. And I'm not going to do all these, but you can see it's the same for gate 31. You can synthesize that yourself. The need to be logical, to be able to express yourself in logical ways, logical leadership, to be able to make predictions that come true. If only I were better at leading others by predicting outcomes for them. Or we look at 8. What's wrong with me? I'm not more creative. If only, if only I had this creative voice, this creative expression, if only I could express myself more creatively. You're plenty creative. Everyone's creative, everyone has that dormantly. And the thing is, being a reflector, you find like reflectors who are sad they don't have any channels. It's like you have every channel that you have a hanging gate, just not consistently. Some of the time, you do have the 48-16. You have that whenever 16 is transited. You have it once a month because of the moon, sometimes you do have gate 20. Sometimes you do have gate 31. Sometimes you do have gate 8. It's knowing that when you have it, you have access to that otherwise dormant life force energy. The channels are the life force. The channels are what makes the aura. The channels are what gives the different types their qualities. The channels make the types. I mean, the types are derived from the channels. The channels are absolutely more than the sum of their parts. The channels are not just two gates together. The channels are a third thing that emerges out of the synthesis of those gates that gives you your life force energy. And you do have that 4816 once every 27.3 days. And you do have that 2010 once every 27.3 days and more, sometimes for years at a time with Neptune or Pluto. So, okay, so still looking at the throat. Let's just look at these completely open channels then. The 1762, completely open. The 4323, completely open. The 1156, the 3536, the 1222, the 4521. Now, what happens when you have a completely open channel with an undefined center is the theme of blaming other people. So you'll see the first theme we looked at is how you would blame yourself for lacking gate 16, gate 20, gate 31, gate 8, gate 33. That's blaming yourself. What's wrong with me that I don't have this? What's wrong with me that I'm not better at this, right? Well, now it's what's wrong with them? What's wrong with them? And it's feeling like you have to do it yourself because they are lacking. So this can come out in a lot of different ways. There's different ways of deconstructing this. On the one hand, it can be, I never try to get anybody's attention. It's the other people who are always trying to get attention. It can be denial, right? A theme of denial. Or, I don't feel like I have problems being heard. I think other people have complexes around being heard. I don't interrupt people, others interrupt people. Or I don't talk too quietly, others talk too quietly. Or I don't, all the different ways that the undefined throat can have these sort of abnormalities, right? So it can be, or issues, I should say, not abnormalities, really. The undefined throat issues. So it can be like, I don't have these problems, others have it, but it can also be a rationalization for why you have to do it. Well, I have to do it myself because I can't rely on anybody else. I have to find the interesting things to say because nobody else has anything interesting. Or I have to express myself in this way. I have something I got to say and I have to get their attention. It's basically rationalizations for getting people's attention. I have to get their attention because nobody else will tell them what they need to hear. That's gate 12, for instance. Gate 12, trying to get people's attention so you can get them to change. I have to get their attention so I can change their habits, so I can mutate them, so I can change them, and it's all on me to do it. So that's why I'm trying to get their attention, because nobody else will do it. That's why I'm sending 500 emails out, and that's why I'm calling them on the phone, and that's why I'm interrupting them and telling them all about it, is because nobody else will. Or 4521, I have to speak on behalf of my needs and of the needs of people in my family and my friends and my tribe, because nobody else is advocating for us. Nobody else is speaking on behalf of our needs. So I'd better do it, right? The feeling that you have to do it. I have to talk about emotions because nobody else will talk about emotions. I have to structure and explain all this stuff, that 4323, because nobody else out there has figured out a way to structure it or explain it. So that's why I'm trying to get your attention right now, because it's very important that I do this. So you can see that when you have the whole channel open, there can be a lot of rationalization and a lot of denial and a lot of basically justifications for trying to get people's attention. So we move on to the sacral. This undefined sacral does have activations. That's gate 29 and gate 59. And so this is all about not knowing when enough is enough, overdoing it, working too hard, expending energy you don't have, being a busybody when you don't have the energy to actually do it, and just overdoing it, staying up too late, doing too much, biting off more than you can chew, starting a project, and instead of doing a reasonable amount of work on it, working on it for 8 hours or 10 hours or 12 hours or 14 hours straight. This is the undefined sacral, not knowing when enough is enough. And we're going to see the themes here. We see gate 29 has that theme of basically overcommitting, of saying yes to too much, spreading itself too thin. And gate 59 is going to be looking for intimacy, or for being available for intimacy with others. So this is the feeling of, I have to be available for them. I have to work hard for them and have my energy available, because that's how I'm going to get intimacy in my life, and that's how I'm going to, I better say yes to them, basically. I better commit myself to them. Because ultimately, if I commit myself, and if I get that intimacy, and if I'm available for them, and if I work hard for them, put all this energy for them, then I'll get surprised. I'll get that surprise I'm looking for. Something surprising will happen, and if I don't do that, I'll never get any surprise ever, and I'm just going to be disappointed. You can see how the mind works here. It's feeling like you have to do these things. You have to do that gate 29. You have to say yes, or something bad will happen. You have to be available intimately, or something bad will happen. And then we see, for instance, the 15-5 persecuting yourself in that regard. The feeling like, what's wrong with me? Why am I not in a better rhythm? Why do I not have more sacral energy available to enter into these rhythms? Or that, 27 in that undefined sacral, feeling like you're lacking, that part of you doesn't care as much as it should. This is a channel that's very much about caring. Splenic channel, and then you have these completely open ones, like, you have more being persecuted. You have the 10 pointing at 34. That's feeling like, why don't I have more power? If only I had more power. If only I had more energy. If I had more energy, everything would be different. Why am I so low energy? Why do I feel like I don't have enough power to actually do these things? And then the completely open channels, like the 42-53, the 360, the 952. That's feeling that others are lacking, that nobody's there with you, that nobody's there to help you get started, for instance. That nobody's there to ever have anything new come along. That nobody's there to concentrate or focus or sit still with you, and actually have things emerge out of stillness. And so these are all going to be excuses for continued activity. The mind is going to be using these as excuses. Well, I have to keep doing it. I have to keep working, because if I don't do it, who will? Nobody else will be there for me to do it. And so these are all excuses that the mind makes to keep overdoing it. It's just going to keep overdoing it and overdoing it and overdoing it. And next we have the root. We have a very packed root. It feels like it has a lot of obligations. Oh, I'd better be ambitious. I'd better be career focused, I'd better have the energy to fight for what's important for me. Gate 38, that fighter. Oh, I'd better have the energy to improve things and fix things and make them better. Gate 58. I'd better have the energy to provoke the spirit. I'd better have that energy to provoke the excitement and the spirited, sort of energized solar plexus. And so it's feeling like you have to do all these things, and those are the justifications for continuing to burn out on root energy, going fast, more. It's the more from the sacral, and the faster from the root. And you can see that there's also the feeling of defects here, of lacking that 19. Why am I not better at this? Why don't I have the energy to flirt? Why don't I have the energy to be playful, and so on? Or 41, why do I lack the imagination that would energize me to actually get out there and see the world? Oh, I would travel, but I lack the imagination to do so. I can't even think of where I'd want to go. I can't even imagine what I want to do. And so you can see how for each of these, again, you can deconstruct them and think about them, and how when there's a defined gate in the undefined center, that active gate, you're going to feel like you have to do this thing. So you're feeling like you have to be ambitious. Gate 54, I have to be ambitious. I have to be a go-getter. I have to transform my material circumstances, and I have to help my friends do the same. I have to help them get ahead in life. I have to bring up my tribe through ambition, and I better do it in a hurry. I feel all this pressure to do it. The root is a pressure center. It's a pressurized thing. I'd better do it, and I'd better not wait, because if I wait, I'm going to miss my chance. So I better do it now, and I better hurry about it. I'm going to hurry up and be ambitious and all this stuff. And then you see how when you have a hanging gate pointing at the undefined center, it's a feeling of having a shortcoming. Why am I not better at flirting? Why don't I have a better imagination? What's wrong with me? And so deconditioning in those cases is going to be very different. Deconditioning in the first case is realizing you don't have to do that. You can stop doing that. It's not a good rationalization. You don't have to be in a hurry. You don't have to hurry up just because you feel like you're going to miss the opportunity to further your agenda of ambition, And then the second case, there's nothing wrong with you. There's no defect. You don't have to feel bad. And you don't have to imagine how everything would be different if you had that thing. It's okay you don't have gate 41. I don't have gate 41 either. And guess what? Both of us are plenty imaginative, I'm sure. Because we still get to experience gate 41 through other people. We get to know who has a rich imagination or not. We get to enjoy the fruits of their rich imagination. We get to read travel guides and get inspired to go visit somewhere. And we get to piggyback on other people's fantasies, and we get to experience their fantasies. We don't have to provide the fantasy. They will. And, that's what it's about. And then the third case is when you have the completely open channel pointing at an undefined center, like with the 4253 or the 360 or the 952. That's where we get denial and blame and justification because you feel all alone and that nobody else will help you with it. I am pressuring myself to focus on this because nobody else can focus. None of my coworkers can focus, so I better do it. I'm going to pressure myself to do it. Or I'm going to pressure myself to start this new thing because nobody else will start anything with me. I'm talking about gate 43. For instance, or I'm going to pressure myself to bring this, a mutation out into the world because nobody else is doing it. So let's just take these first three. Let's just take a little pause here for a moment. So these are like the outer layer. Let's say together, these are the outer layer of the not self, meaning that these three are going to be what people see when they see you. They're not going to see that undefined ego. They're not going to see the deep insecurity or the feeling threatened of the undefined ego or the self-esteem issues or the, trying to prove yourself or always feeling like you have to improve and you're not good enough. They're not going to see any of that stuff. They're not going to see the undefined solar plexus with its always hiding. The undefined solar plexus is the biggest liar. It just hides who it is. It's terrified for anyone to see what they actually like or dislike or who they really are. They're always pretending, right? It's the most pretend of the not self. They're not going to see that. They're not going to see the undefined G center where it feels so lost. It feels so lost and it feels like it doesn't have a home and it never really had a home. And maybe it never will have a home. And it's not really sure if it's with the right person or in the right job. And it's not really sure if it lives in the right place. They're not going to see any of that. No. They're going to see, here's somebody who gets our attention and has a lot of energy available to us, will say yes to us, will say yes to our requests, and will work really hard, put all that energy into it, and they'll work fast, too. They'll get it done in a hurry. They will stand to attention. We can pressure them to speed up, and they will speed up without batting an eyelash. So they look at you and they say, here's somebody who grabs our attention, captivates our attention, and they will work really hard for us, and they'll work really fast for us. And here's someone who's available. It's so funny. You look at somebody with an undefined, an undefined sacral, and you see that they're available. Meaning that undefined sacral, the not self, puts off this, I'm available. I have the energy. That's the not self, right? It doesn't. It really doesn't have the energy, but it gives the impression. Because the not self will work them to the bone. These people will collapse from exhaustion. Ra Uruhu had undefined sacral, an undefined root. And he talked about how he started a new job. I don't know if he was some manual labor job, like laying railroad track or something. And he started this job. It probably wasn't that, but in my imagination, see, I don't have gate 41, but I have plenty of imagination. No, in my imagination, he's laying railroad, let's say. And in any case, by the end of the first day, everyone was so mad at him. And they said, you're all making us look bad, because he was working harder and faster than anybody. Harder and faster than anybody. The undefined centers amplify. You want to see the most emotional people in the world? See a not self undefined solar plexus person, the most emotional person you'll ever meet in the world, right? The amplifying goes stronger than what it normally would be. You want to see the most egotistic person in the world? Look at an undefined ego when they're really puffed up. Then you want to see someone who feels the worst about their self-esteem? Also look at that undefined ego. See? So yeah, it's really, the not self. It's a thing, right? The not self. So, so what they're going to see is these three not self themes. They're going to see, looking at you, here's somebody who will work really hard and they'll work really fast, and they're a fluid communicator who's not afraid to express. They're a clear communicator, all this stuff. Undefined throat, the not self, is going to over-communicate. They can under-communicate too. I mean, these are all binaries. It's just not going to have appropriate communication, we could say. Okay, so then we keep going. So we get to kind of the middle part. So the middle part, we look at the head, the ajna, and the spleen. And so looking at the head, there's also pressure, just like the root. But in this case, it's going to be pressure to think about things until you can make sense of them. And that's gate 64. That's that head pressure, like, I better think about this. If I just keep thinking about it, then I'll finally get to turn my brain off. I find that undefined head people often turn to narcotics, alcohol, even a cup of caffeine-free tea and a bath, or they have their coping mechanisms for turning off the head because the head gets so full of activity. I have undefined head and I have gate 64 activated in the undefined head. And let me tell you, the not self of the undefined head with gate 64 is the most mental activity you've ever found. It's so much mental activity. It's not like gate 63 where, as the not self, these are super skeptical people and they're people that are, really doubtful and so on. But their mind is pretty still. But with that gate 64, this is a racing mind. This is a confused mind. So much confusion with the promise, if only I keep thinking about it, then maybe I'll be surprised. Maybe I'll be surprised. And if I can't stop thinking about it, because if I stop, I'm going to be disappointed. The carrot and the stick, right? All along the way, the carrot and the stick of the promise that something surprising will happen if you just keep doing it. Of course, it won't. So the undefined head is going to be jumping to try to solve everybody else's problems, to think about all their stuff. It's going to glom on to confusing circumstances and have the feeling if I just keep thinking about it, then I can finally get clarity. I'll finally have that clarity. But meanwhile, gate 61 and gate 63 are missing, right, and experienced as missing, experienced as lacking. And we see that their harmonic gates, 24 and 4, are pointing at them. And so what happens there is the feeling that something's wrong, something's wrong. Why don't I have a mind of a thinker? Why can't I have that breakthrough? Why don't I have that epiphany? And why am I so gullible? Why don't I doubt enough? I should be doubting more, but something's wrong with me. I just don't have that skeptical mind. I don't even know what questions to ask. I could be free from all this mental pressure if only I knew where to begin, but I don't even know what questions to ask. And so it's this feeling of deficiencies too, feeling like you have a very deficient mind in this way. So we're talking about the head, of course, and the head center is this pressure center, getting all this pressure in, and this feeling that you have to keep thinking about it. And if you keep thinking about it, if somebody asks you a question, if you keep thinking about it, good things will come from it. You'll be surprised. You'll be on the right track, when it's not true. The deconditioning is to stop thinking about stuff that doesn't matter. Stop thinking about things that aren't important. And the way you do this is you basically notice when it happens. So I'll give you a little homework for this one. Every time you think about Googling something, ask yourself if you really need to Google it or not, and then just let go. It's one of the hardest things. I have undefined head. It's so hard for me. Somebody says, what year did the Library of Alexandria burn? And I'm like, I think I know the answer, and I want to check to see if I'm correct. Was it 50 BC? Maybe it was 50 AD. Oh, geez, And then I think it was 50 BC. But see, now I want to check. Just talking about it, my mind immediately is like, I want to look it up. I want to know, And I feel like I want to know that. And then did Julius Caesar burn it down? Well, I think that's correct, but why did he burn it down? Well, wasn't it an accident? Well, now I want to know. I want to look it up, and I want to find out. And that's the thing. When you have this undefined head, it just wants to know all this random shit that doesn't matter. And it's going to start thinking, now particularly if you're in aura with someone with a defined head, which also means they have defined ajna, right? Everyone with a defined head automatically has defined ajna. If you're in aura with them, then you're going to be thinking all about this. And of course, as a reflector, you're going to be even more profoundly impacted by the transits, by the program, than by other people. So when you have, when the moon clicks into gate 47 for that, 11 hours or however much it does each month, you're going to really be thinking a lot. It's going to be totally activating that confusion channel. And then when it clicks into 61, again, and when it clicks into 63, again. So you're going to have that defined head ajna experience of it really actively kicking into high gear. And so the thing to realize is that when you have these activations, on the one hand, you have access to a latent life force energy. Suddenly you have access to this energy. Fantastic. On the other hand, as long as the mind is making mental decisions, you're going to have the not self themes emerge. So it's just to realize there's always the binary. There's always the potential for wisdom, but there's also always that not self theme at the ready. Looking at the ajna, we see gate 24. I have to keep thinking about it again and again and again. I'd better keep thinking about it until I'm certain. And if I just keep thinking about it, because it's the gate of returning, then I'll be certain. Gate 24 is also the gate of getting songs stuck in your head, by the way, just as a side note. Gate 4, the gate of answers. Well, I'd better have all the answers. I'd better be certain of the answers. I know this one very well, too. I also have gate 4. I also have undefined ajna. So I also feel like I have to be the answer guy. I have to have the answers, and I have to be certain. And we don't have to be certain. We're not here to be certain. The great mantra, Lars Haglund, a member of Human Design Interactive, and I believe he's a 5-2 actually. I could be wrong. I think he might be a 5-2. I think he's a 5-2 projector. Anyway, he had this great contribution, which I've been doing my best to, universalize, which is that the mantra for the undefined head and ajna, don't know, don't care. The undefined ajna, don't know. It should say, I don't know. When people ask, hey, do you know when the Library of Alexandria burned? I don't know. And then, if they really press you, say, well, quite frankly, I don't care either. So it's realizing that the don't know, don't care is the most powerful curative for the undefined head and ajna. And again, just watching every time you think that you have to have the answer to something and so on. And you're also going to notice that there's 3 undefined channels, the 1762, 4323, and the 1156, from the throat to the ajna. And so that's also going to be the feeling, the denial aspect of it. Well, I don't care if I'm certain. Other people are always trying to be certain. There's the denial aspect, but there's also the blame aspect. Well, the reason that I'm trying to figure it out is because I can't rely on anybody else to do it. I have to do it myself. That's why I'm trying to be certain, And this feeling that if you're certain, then you can avoid disappointment. Again, all throughout all of this, I can avoid disappointment. I'll avoid disappointment if I just work hard, and if I work fast to be ambitious, and if I think about all this stuff that's confusing, and if I'm certain of all my answers, and I keep, and on and on and on and on. It's all of this carrot and the stick thing of I can avoid disappointment. That's the stick of disappointment, right? I'll avoid disappointment as long as I think about all this stuff, as long as I work fast and all that. So we're getting deeper into the not self. Now we're kind of in the middle, and we are at the spleen. And the undefined spleen is going to hold on to what's not good for you. So you have gate 48, gate of solutions, the gate of depth, the depth of solutions. I will hold on to these solutions even though they're not good for me. They work for me. That's enough. They give me a sense of security and safety. They work for me. They give me a sense of consistency. I'm going to hold on to them. And by the way, this can also be an excuse. The other not self side of the spleen you don't hear people talk about as much is being spontaneous. Undefined spleen is not supposed to be spontaneous, but they can rationalize it by saying, well, yeah, I'm being spontaneous, but I have to be because I have this solution that works for me, don't you see? And it's not good for them. As Ra always says, if you're undefined spleen, being spontaneous can get you killed. Gate 57 felt as something lacking. Gate 10 is there pointing at it. I should mention in this case, these are not always consistent, right? Because I guess I just took it for granted that all of this is very inconsistent. If you have a defined center with a hanging gate pointing at an undefined center, then it's consistently persecuting that unactivated gate, right? Like if the G center were defined here, then gate 10 would be always there, kind of staring across the channel at gate 57, going, why don't you have gate 57? Everything would be different if you had gate 57. The fact that you don't have any defined centers means all of this is going to be occasional, but it's still valid. It's just to realize that these are going to be kind of intermittent. So yeah, we have gate 10 there pointing at the 57. 57 is the gate of intelligence. This is quite simply the feeling of not being smart enough. If only I were smarter, if only I were more intelligent, then I wouldn't be so disappointed in life. And it's not true. You're absolutely smart enough. But there's that feeling, right? The deconditioning there is to realize that you're designed perfectly just the way you are, there's no flaw in your design. It's very much like what split definition people have to come to in their deconditioning. Because split definition, simple split anyway, with a single gate or multiple single gates that would bridge it, with only one gate activation, they feel like there's something deficient in them. Why am I missing this thing? Well, it's the same here. Why am I not smart enough? We see that also with gate 32. Why am I not ambitious enough? Or why don't I know where to put my ambition? It's like you have the ambition at 54 in that undefined root going, here I am, I better be ambitious. I better go out there and make my situation better. I better transform my material resources. I better get a makeover and get a new haircut and make myself, do all these ambitious things. But there's the 32 going, but I don't really know how. I don't know what haircut's going to get me the job, Gate 28, I have all this energy fighting for purpose, but I don't really know what's going to bring my life purpose. If only I were better at knowing what would give me a sense of purpose in life. If only I were better, right? Then I wouldn't be so disappointed. Gate 18, I have all this energy to improve things. I've worked so hard and so fast. I'm under all this pressure to improve things, but I don't know where to begin. I don't know how to improve them. And if only I knew how to make it better, everything would be different. If I knew how to make it better, then I wouldn't be disappointed, right? So you see how if the feeling that there's something lacking in you, and that the deconditioning here is realizing there's nothing wrong. It's okay you don't have gate 57. It's okay you don't have gate 32 or 28 or 18. And you can see that there's also activations there. 44 is activated. 44 is part of that same stream that comes out of 54. So again, it's the feeling of, I don't have to be an entrepreneur, but I'd better keep an eye out for entrepreneurs so that I can work with them. I better keep an eye out for talent. I better keep an eye out for those people who really know what they're doing so we can make money together. Keep an eye out for those 26s, Or gate 50, I'd better take on this responsibility, because if I take on the responsibility, then I won't be disappointed. And by the way, these are all fear gates too. There's a great fear of responsibility, and there can be so many fears in the spleen as well. I haven't really got into that part of it. Okay, so now as we close on the spleen, we're getting to the big three, and we're getting right down to it. And I hope that as I've been painting this picture, that you really are kind of imagining this mental model of a whole hierarchy, a whole structure of decision making, so that someone says, hey, do you want to take this job? And in a blink of an eye, in a split second, the mind runs through all of this and goes, well, I can avoid disappointment as long as I say yes. Gate 29, so I better say yes. It starts already, but it goes, but I better make sure. Is this going to get me attention? Well, then, okay, great. Am I going to be able to, am I going to be under pressure to get a lot done? Well, yes, and then it keeps going. Is it going to bring me safety and security? Am I going to be able to hold on to it? That undefined spleen. Is it going to bring me certainty? The ajna is looking so much for certainty. The head, is looking to be free from the pressure. Is this going to help me be free from the pressure from the head? I mean, the root is also, so it could also be, is this going to give me some freedom from the root pressure? I mean, essentially what I'm trying to say is that the not-self decision-making is going to use each and every one of these activations in each and every one of these undefined centers in its decision-making. And some are going to play a big part, some are going to play a small part. And so far, we've started on the outside, and now we're getting close to the core of the not-self. So here we're going to be looking at the aspects of the not-self that are by far the strongest in the decision-making. So let's look at the G center. The undefined G center. What is it about? It's the grass is always greener. It's searching for love and searching for direction in life. It's not feeling like it has a home or not knowing where it belongs. It's basically searching. The trick for the undefined G center, the not self, is that it's always searching. And the true self is to realize it doesn't need to search anymore. That good things come to it. Of course, it has to be discerning. The undefined G center rule is people and place. The right people take you to the right place, and in the right place you meet the right people. So practicing discernment. But if you're looking to move into a new house, don't go looking for the new house. Tell your friends you want to find a new place. Tell your friends you're looking, but then don't look. And then wait for your friends to find it for you. You know, if you're looking for a relationship, don't go on some dating app or don't go out there and try to pursue the relationship. Let it come to you. Because anytime you have an undefined center, the world is going to try to fill that void. It's going to try to fill that gap. You don't have to go do the thing. It's the not self that thinks it has to do all the things. It doesn't. So we see this undefined G center, and this is where you get, really, it can be a feeling of being lost. It can be a feeling of being aimless, not knowing what direction to go. It can feel like there's no home or family or no sense of belonging, or is not sure about the career or the relationship, all this stuff. And here, there's the rationalization to keep searching. And in fact, there's 5 rationalizations to keep searching. Gate 10, well, I'd better keep searching to honor my present commitment to myself, basically, to honor my commitment to myself, because it's not being true to myself if I stop searching. Or gate 1, I have to keep searching because, there has to be something new out there, this drive for some creative impulse. These are going to be a little tricky to look at basically what they mean, but you can figure out that they're basically rationalizations. That gate 13 is going to rationalize the desire to keep searching because of the need for more experience, because it's experiential. Gate 7 is going to rationalize the need to keep searching because it's logical. It's going to say that it needs to have more data for its experiments, and it needs to be able to know what predictions are true or not, and it's predicted that something better is out there. Just like gate 1 is that individual creative impulse for something different. There must be something different. Maybe it'll be different, right? I have to keep searching because somewhere maybe it'll be different. That's the dream of the individual. Individual circuitry is always dreaming something would change. Or gate 15 is also logical, like that 7. And it's all about extremes. And, I'd better keep searching because I might find something that has the right extreme for me. And I better take it to the extreme. I better keep looking till I go to these extremes in my search, because I won't know for sure. And you can tie these together. The undefined ajna, trying to know. The undefined G center, trying to find. Well, I won't know for sure until I've gone to that extreme. That's gate 15. Going to that extreme. I won't know for sure if it's right for me until I get to Antarctica. I won't know for sure if it's right for me until I join this commune and stay awake, for 4 hours at a time on the cycle or whatever. I'm trying to think of some extreme lifestyles. So you can see how with that gate 15 there, it's going to be the feeling the need to take things to extremes. And meanwhile, there's also that persecution of gate 46, which gate 46 is the gate of the body, of refreshing the body, of showers and bathing and going to the gym and loving the body and massage and dance, and it's part of synchronistic stuff too. And it can feel like, well, why, how come I have such bad luck? And what's wrong with me that I can't find the right place, that I can't find a place that's really good for my body, that I can't find the environment that's correct for my body, that I can't find the person who will really embrace my body or love my body as it is, and so on. So you can see that, and I'm basically coming up with these on the fly. Some of these are gates that I've thought about before, and, but what I'm doing, what I'm hoping to do, and as I paint this picture, is not to give you the end-all, be-all, ultimate picture. It's to demonstrate a technique. And it's a technique that you yourself can employ. And what you can do is, as you're learning your chart, you can take your own notes. And in fact, I would love it if you would share it with me, because as a fifth line, you probably come up with all sorts of practical stuff. It's just you might not feel the need to share it, but I would love if you would share your observations with me. And as you say, oh, you know what? I noticed every time gate 15 is lit up, I suddenly start thinking about all the extremes that I want, or something else. You might say, actually, Jonah, what you said was wrong here. It didn't play out that way for me. It played out this way instead. And that's really valuable information for me, especially from innocence people, because they have no agenda. When they're really living their design, they have no agenda. So as we move on from the G center, and you'll see the gate 2551, that channel is also completely open. This can just be the feeling that nobody else is really out there. I'll talk about this more as we get to the ego, but this can feel like there's really a lack of support out there. And the same with the 214, it can feel like nobody's really there to help you find where to go. You got to do it all on your own, because there's no 14 out there to give you the energy to go places, and there's no 2s out there to direct that energy, to really point you in the right direction. So the 214, if you have one person and they have the 14 and the other has the 2, the 14 is like the full tank of gas, and the 2 is like the GPS saying go here, go there, and so on. So you can feel like you're really all alone in that respect, and like there's nobody there to help you, and that's why you have to keep searching. That's why you have to keep looking. And again, synthesize these together. I mean, already we have the feeling I have to keep searching for the right place for me, and I can't give up searching, and I can't stop until I'm certain, undefined ajna, right? And I better do it in a big hurry, because I'll miss my opportunity if I don't hurry up, undefined root. And once I find that place, I better not let go of it. I better not ever let go of anything that helps me find that place. Because, even if it's not good for me, if it's helping me find that place, that's the only way that I'll avoid disappointment in this life. And it just keeps going and going and going. I better put so much energy into it, that undefined sacral, just pour energy into it to find that right place. And so you see how they all tie together. The undefined head is thinking really hard about where the right place could be, trying to figure it out. And the undefined ajna is trying to be certain, and the spleen is holding on to anything that helps you get there. And again, this whole time, this G center is just saying, hey, here's this fantasy that somewhere you'll feel at home, somewhere you'll be in the right place. There's some utopia out there for you with the right people, and you'll have your true love, and you'll be in your right profession, and you'll have your true life purpose, and all these things, and you can't give up. You have to keep trying to find it, and as long as you keep trying to find it, you can stay away from disappointment. And if you stop trying to find it, you'll be disappointed. That's always the threat, right? The not self is constantly making that threat. You'll be disappointed. If you stop thinking about it, you'll be disappointed. If you're not certain, you'll be disappointed. If you don't keep searching for it, you'll be disappointed. If you don't hold on tightly to it, you'll be disappointed. So that's where these not self themes come up. That's where it becomes, I'm going to hold on so tightly, I'm never going to let go. I'm going to keep searching, I'm never going to give up. I'm going to keep thinking about it, and so on, until I find the truth. And you find the not self here. So as we keep going, we get to the undefined solar plexus. And the undefined solar plexus is the great liar. It's the great deceiver. It's the great pretender. And it's basically so afraid. It's another fear center, really. We have the ajna, which is full of anxieties. We have the spleen, which is full of straight up fears, like survival fears in some ways. And then we have the nervousness of the solar plexus. But really all three of those are fears. So the solar plexus and the ajna have fears also. So we have the fear of the solar plexus, for instance. Gate 30 is the fear of fate. It's the fear that as soon as something good happens, it's going to be taken away from you by fate. The cruel fates will come and you'll get news that it's being taken away. You find your true love, but then the fates come and take them away from you, you know. There's different fears, and you can go through them and you can see how they play out whether or not you have the activation. Because that's something else to realize is as you engage with the program and as you really watch and learn all of these, how these transits affect you, you'll realize that every single gate is lit up once every 27 days for you, and probably more because of the other bodies moving in the skies. And basically what you'll find is, you have a relationship to each and every one of these. You have a relationship to each and every one of these fears. You have a relationship to all of these gates. But looking at the activations you have the 49 and the 30. So the 49 is the feeling that you have to take possession of someone when they're yours. It's really possessiveness. The 1949 is where we get jealousy. And the 19 is there to flirt. And the 49 is there to display material resources and say, okay, I see you flirting. Well, look at all this material resources. I can give you these. I can support you materially. But you have to stop flirting with everyone else now. Now you only flirt with me. And it's really where we get possessiveness and this kind of tribal bond and so on. So you can see how part of you might feel like you have to take possession of people. But again, this is in the context of the undefined solar plexus, which is all about hiding. It's all about don't rock the boat. Don't show anyone how you really feel. Don't show anyone what you really think of them. Don't show anyone what you really like or dislike. Hide, 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 hide. And so in that context, it might be a little bit different. It might be, if I really want to keep those people in my life, if I really want them to support me and to have those supportive tribal relationships, I'd better not show them who I really am. Because if I show them who I really am, they're not going to like me. If I show them who I really am, they're not going to support me. If I show them who I really am, there's not going to be anybody there for me. And with gate 30, it's again with the fates, it can be, I better not show anybody who I really am, because then the fates will come in and take them away. Meanwhile, we have 39 pointing at the 55. This can be the feeling of not having enough spirit in your life, not having enough enthusiasm. What's wrong with me? Why am I not more spirited? Why does my spirit feel defeated? Why am I not enthusiastic enough? If only I had a more spirited approach to life, everything would be different. Then I wouldn't be so disappointed. And then meanwhile, we just have also gate 6. And why am I not more available for sexual intimacy? Why am I not better at getting intimate with people? There can also be a real fear of intimacy. So there can be a fear of intimacy there from gate 6. But what's going to happen is, because you have these open channels too, there's also a fair amount of denial. Oh, I don't have fear of intimacy. Other people have that. I don't have sexual hang-ups. Other people have sexual hang-ups. Channel 35, 36, right? I don't have any hang-ups about sex. I'm not, other people have that. Or 1222. I'm not afraid of silent treatment, and I don't worry about having people to listen to or having people to talk to or communicate with. Other people are so worried about that. Or 4037. Tribal support. This would be the denial. I'm not worried about having enough support. Other people feel unsupported. I don't feel that. So there's so much denial and so much pretending and trying to show the certain catered sides of you. I mean, anyone who has undefined solar plexus, they're going to really be so careful about what they show. And the closer someone is to you, the more careful you are. It's like a stranger, you could tell anything, but then somebody who actually knows you well, you've built up such an image of yourself for them so carefully that, say you have something that you really want to do, like to use the example of, sexual hang-ups. Undefined solar plexus people are the worst at admitting their sexual desires or what they're interested in, because they're afraid someone will judge them for it. There's a lot of shame here. There's a lot of shame in the undefined solar plexus. This is where we feel shame. This is where we feel embarrassment. This is where we feel we don't want to show somebody what we're really into. We don't want to, even something as simple as music. Undefined solar plexus might like a band that's a so-called guilty pleasure. And the undefined solar plexus starts dating someone, will hide the fact they like that band. They don't want their partner to know because they're embarrassed. It's just embarrassment. It's shame. It's hiding who you are because you're afraid that the person isn't going to like it or they're going to reject you, or oftentimes afraid it'll be offending to them. 3740 can also be the fear of tradition, which can be the fear of standing up to tradition, afraid you'll hurt someone's feelings, if they are into something you're not into. Lots of comedy comes out of this undefined solar plexus dynamic, by the way. Anytime you see a comedy where somebody lies and then they have to keep going with the lie, that is the undefined solar plexus in a nutshell. That is it. They've lied and they just have to keep playing along with the lie and pretending it's true, and they can't get out of it, and it keeps getting worse and worse and worse, and they have to lie more and more and more. That's the undefined solar plexus right there. So you can notice when it's happening. You can notice when you have to ask your boss for a raise and it takes you 3 weeks to get up the nerve to do it because you're afraid of hurting their feelings. Or you have to break up with somebody and you don't want to tell them that you're going to break up with them because you don't want to hurt them. You don't want to disappoint them. I mean, more extreme case, say you have fundamentalist Christian parents, family members, and you're gay. What do you do then? Some people out there with undefined solar plexus tragically would rather end their lives than confront the truth about that, which is just so sad. It's heartbreaking that the undefined solar plexus can lead to such shame and such embarrassment about who somebody is and their choice of sexual partner that they would end their own lives instead of confront it. The undefined solar plexus, it's living a lie. You can hear Ra talk about it. He had defined ego. So for him, the solar plexus was it. He was single definition with defined ego. So Ra, that was his not self. And until he was 39 years old and until he started doing, human design, he had lived his entire life never showing someone who he really was, keeping everybody at arm's length, keeping everybody at a distance. I always like to joke about, I know it's not funny, but in a dark sense of humor way, I joke about the undefined spleen with the undefined solar plexus. And I do this because I have both. I have both undefined spleen and undefined solar plexus. So my joke is, in relationships, I will smother people and cling to them and never let go, undefined spleen, but I'll also keep them at arm's length, undefined solar plexus. So I'm never letting them go, but never letting them get close either. You see, the undefined solar plexus is so afraid for someone to see you raw, unfiltered, as you actually are. They're so afraid for you to see who they really are. So it's hiding. That's what avoiding confrontation and truth is. It is hiding. It's pretending. It's lying. And finally, we come to the ego. And the undefined ego is really the diamond of the whole not self, or the lump of coal, really, because it's, if we're talking about it in this dark way, and it's really the kernel of the worst, just the worst suffering in the world is from this undefined ego. If you thought the undefined G center was bad and feeling lost and feeling aimless, or the undefined solar plexus was bad and all of the shame and fear of anyone seeing who you really are, oh, the undefined ego. I feel like I'm channeling Ra when I do this. Some people complain that a lot of human design readings sound a lot like Ra. Well, yeah, if you listen to someone long enough, you're going to kind of sound like them, especially if you have undefined throat, that I do. But also, it's just, when you talk about this stuff, it's like he was there first and he saw it, and you get to kind of share his attitudes about it. And it's actually really empowering. When you just look at the not self and kind of stand back and just go, oh my God, what is this thing, And you start to kind of feel like Ra did when he first saw it. In the same way that, If you went on a Lewis and Clark expedition and got there, you might start feeling a little bit like Lewis and Clark. There's a little bit of identification that happens. So yeah, sometimes I pronounce things the way Ra does, or I share in his sentiment, and I hope you do too. I mean, I think all of us can. This is just a little side note. Someone was saying how they were annoyed with Alak, Diaz. Alak Anand Diaz is this incredible human design reading interpreter and theorist, really, human design theorist. Totally brilliant. If you haven't seen his work, definitely check it out. He was there from the beginning, and he's just such an incredible, brilliant theorist. And someone was saying that they really get annoyed that he does a Ra act, that he sounds like Ra and kind of pretends to be Ra. No, it's about fractal lines. And when you're close to a fractal line, you get to partake in some of that. And part of what you're partaking in is a certain language and a certain way of speaking and certain mannerisms and certain approaches. And so anyway, when I do these not self readings and I get to something like the ego, and especially when I'm doing, this is kind of an extended one, sometimes I do a real cursory one where I just kind of skip over it. But here we're really digging deep. And when I get there, I just imagine Ra himself realizing this and just sitting there and going, oh my God, what the hell is this thing? This is a monster, it's a monster that has controlled humanity. And you see that undefined ego for what it is. It's threat. It's feeling threatened, really. And it's threatening others. And you see how much terrible stuff has come out of this. And this feeling of being threatened or of having to threaten others. And you can see how it goes even beyond the shame of the solar plexus and the despair of the solar plexus. There's a real despair of the undefined ego, which is it's basically, it ties into something so primal. And so it's so much about being threatened, and what it's trying to do is to alleviate that feeling of being threatened by puffing itself up, by essentially proving to itself its value and proving its worth. And the undefined ego, if you want to test your undefined ego and test how you feel when you hear these statements, I'm just going to go through the 4 centers of the undefined ego real quick, and I'm going to tell you that you're lacking them. Gate 21 is about stamina. Gate 51 is about guts. Gate 26 is about nerve. And gate 40 is about capacity. So just listen to this for a moment and then just notice how threatening this feels to the undefined ego. You don't have the stamina to do it. You don't have the guts to do it. You don't have the nerve, and you don't have the capacity. It feels terrible, right? It feels terrible to have a boss take you off the job and say, it's because I just think it's outside of your capacity. You don't have the capacity for this job. To have a loved one leave you and say, it's because you didn't have the guts. You just didn't have the guts. To get that rejection and to have someone say, it's because you didn't have the nerve to do it. You just lacked the nerve. Or to have someone say, well, I don't trust you because you don't have the stamina, because you don't keep your promises. You're not trustworthy. These are like terrible blows to the undefined ego. So you see, all the undefined ego wants to do, all the not self wants to be trustworthy. I'll prove to you how trustworthy I am. I'll prove to you what stamina I have. I'll prove to you that I have the nerve for it. I'll prove to you I have the guts to jump in to the unknown. I'll prove to you I have the capacity. I'll prove to you that I'm loyal. All this stuff. And it can feel so betrayed. The undefined ego can feel more betrayed than anyone else, especially when you have these open channels. 3 out of 4 channels pointing at the ego are totally open. So again, we have, there's nobody there. Nobody's loyal to me. I can't trust anybody. That gate 25 is missing. Everybody has ulterior motives. Gate 25 is the gate of innocence. When it's missing, it feels that other people lack innocence. Who am I going to trust? They're not innocent. They don't have pure motivations. Gate 45 is lacking, right? Gate 45 is not there, so it feels I can't depend on anybody else for money. That's the money line. I can't depend on anybody else for resources. They're not going to support me financially. Gate 40 and 37. 37, the gate of affection is lacking. I can't rely on anybody else for affection. I can't trust anybody to be there for me, to give me that affection. You can see how much despair is in this undefined ego, how much sorrow. And then simultaneously with these undefined channels, the completely open channels, not only do they feel that the other's lacking, not only do they blame the other by saying, oh, what's wrong with other people? Why is everybody so untrustworthy? Why is everybody so on? There's also denial. There's tremendous denial. Oh, I don't have problems trusting people. Other people have trust issues. I don't have problems with loyalty. I'm loyal. Other people are disloyal. I don't have problems with betrayal. Other people are constantly afraid of being betrayed. I don't have problems with stamina. Other people can't. They don't have enough stamina for me. I don't have problems with capacity. Other people don't have the capacity to do it. But the one that you will have a lot of self-recrimination is that 4426. What's wrong with me? What am I lacking that I can't get out there and sell myself? That I can't get out there and be an entrepreneur and be a salesperson and be that nervy egotist who gets up in front of everybody and convinces them and so on. And that's a feeling of this deep down deficiency. If only I were better at selling myself. If only I were better. If only I had more nerve, then I wouldn't be so disappointed in life. Then life wouldn't be a disappointment to me. Then my relationships wouldn't be a disappointment. Then my job wouldn't be a disappointment. Then where I live wouldn't be a disappointment. It would all be different if I just had the nerve. But alas, there's something wrong with me, right? And there's nothing wrong with you. This is just the not self. It's just the not self. So that's what I'm really trying to do here, is show how the not self works, show how it's there telling you, you have to get better, you have to improve. Hey, maybe you should learn human design because then you can improve. What a joke. Now I feel like I'm channeling Ra even more. He goes, what a joke, what a joke. It's like that's really, it's so funny that people get into human design for the not self reasons. And I think that's the only real ethical way to make money off the not self. You sell to the not self in order to mutate them to live as their true self. That's what you do, And that's what Ra did. And that's the only way to kind of ethically sell to the not self. He said, hey, learn human design. You'll be able to improve. And he did that knowing that they all have undefined ego. No, I actually think, because he himself had a defined ego, I don't think that he actually sold human design much to the undefined ego. I think he actually sold it to the generators primarily. And he did that by selling stop to the generators, which is what he grew into with his wisdom of his undefined sacral. But that's a side point. What it really comes down to is this. The undefined ego is going to be there behind everything else. Behind all the shame and hiding of the solar plexus is that threatened ego. Behind the search for the right thing is that threatened ego. All of this, they're layers of an onion. They're nesting Russian dolls. And as you finally get down to it, the undefined ego is behind all of them. And it's there saying, you can do better. Prove to yourself you can do better. You can be a better person. Prove to them that you're loyal to them. Prove that you're a good employee. Prove that you're a good employer. Prove that you're a good husband or wife or father or mother or daughter or son or niece or nephew or uncle or aunt or any of those things. Prove, that you're a good friend to them. And it's telling you every step of the way to prove yourself to them. And to improve yourself and to get better and better at proving yourself. And that's with this promise of surprise. If you do it, you'll finally get the surprise. And if you don't do it, you'll be disappointed. And that's what human design is here to say, is it's not about that. It's really not about that. I mean, you're here to discover your life purpose through your cross of incarnation. You're here to discover what it really means. We don't know what it really means. We don't have examples of people who are 5-2s on the cross of incarnation who are really living their design. We don't know what that means. We don't have a lot of awake reflectors. Ra said that one awake reflector is worth 1,000 generators or 200 generators or whatever. I forget what he said. He was being a little bit full of hyperbole, as he was known for, but he was being a little bit hyperbolic. But it's true that we don't have a lot of awake reflectors, and we don't really know what it's like. And so you're here to uniquely differentiate and to really experience what life is like as a differentiated being, and to really, be an experiment in what it is to be an awake reflector, what it is to be an awake 5-2 cross of incarnation person. And that's what it's all about. And so really, I hope that, my hope here is that you can kind of see the not self now drawn in relief, and some of its nuances and some of its details, and really watch it play out in your own life, and watch when that 9-headed hydra rears one of its heads, and then notice and use these signposts to notice what your reaction is, and when you're able to just witness it, and when you're able to just observe it, and no longer has its power over you, it's been depotentiated, to notice the progressive depotentiation of the not self. So you notice that undefined ego flare up and want to convince somebody they're wrong, or want to prove something, or whatever it is, or want to prove your loyalty. Or you notice feeling so offended by a betrayal, and feeling so betrayed, and feeling nobody's there for you, and they're so disloyal and you can't trust them. And notice this stuff, and then notice that it's no longer driving your actions. It's no longer driving your decisions, right? Notice the undefined solar plexus flare up, and you're so afraid to ask for that raise, or to tell that person that you're breaking up with them, or whatever it is. And then just notice it, and notice that it no longer has that control over you. And that's the experiment. All right, thanks for listening. It's been a joy. Take care.